Welcome back to Just Scribble. Recently, Chalkola reached out to me and asked if I would like to try out some of their paint sets, specifically their gouache paint set and their acrylic paint set, and share it with you guys. And I have been trying for the last couple of months to carve out a little bit of time every week to paint as my self-care item for the week. For me, painting, whether I'm good at it or not, is very relaxing. I just find the process of painting and even just swatching or mixing colors and putting it down on paper is a very relaxing process. But I've been doing that mainly with watercolors because that's what I own the most of. And I had really wanted to get into gouache and try it a little bit more. I only have a couple of random tubes of gouache. I don't have any full sets. And I have also been wanting to get into acrylic paints. So when Chalkola asked if I wanted to try out these two paint sets, I said yes, because the timing couldn't be more perfect. So we are going to check out these paint sets, what they come with, and swatch them out together. But we're going to do this in two videos for two main reasons. One is that swatching out a 36 color gouache set and a 32 color acrylic set would make for a really long video. But the other reason is because not everyone that uses gouache uses acrylic and vice versa. And so I think separating the videos into two is better so that if someone is just looking to see the gouache set, they can watch that video. If someone is just looking for the acrylic set, they can watch that video. And if you wanted to watch both, which would be my preference because it definitely helps my channel grow and it lets you see more products, then you could watch both. So we're going to do this in two separate videos. In this video, we're going to do the gouache set, and then in a second video, we will do the acrylic set. So I'm gonna move the acrylic set out of the way, and we're gonna check out this gouache set together. So this is their gouache 36 color paint set, and it does say that this is made with premium artist pigments. And they do state on their website that their products are great for really anyone, a kid, a craft person, a hobbyist, or even an artist. And one thing that I was impressed about just from looking at the box, because I actually haven't opened it up yet, is that they do have color names for all of their paints on the back. They have the pigment code information and also the light fastness and opacity information. So if you look there, each color of their gouache provides that information. So these would be suitable to use if you were an artist and you were selling your artwork because you have all the information that you need for the pigments and the light fastness. It's not like craft brands that you find at hobby stores and places like that where it doesn't provide all the information, so you couldn't use it as an artist. I am not a professional artist. I am a hobbyist, I feel like. So this would work for me regardless, but this makes me happy because I do generally use professional grade watercolors. I just think that they perform better and gives me like an immediate confidence in their paints because that information is there. So I know that they have taken the time to provide that information. So the set does include 10 brushes, 1 palette knife, 1 palette, and a sponge, and 36 tubed paints that are 12 milliliter tubes each. So we're going to open this up and check it out. So we got a palette knife, has a number 3 on there. I am not going to use the palette knife for this video, but I just wanted to show it to you. Palette knives are super useful. I actually don't use them very much for paint. I do use them for putting down watercolor medium, but I also use them for stickers. So if you place down a sticker in your planner and you want to remove it, if you use undo, a palette knife helps you remove that sticker. I actually use palette knives more in my planner for removing stickers than I do for anything else. So it's always good to have an extra. So we have the palette knife. We have a sponge. I probably won't use that either personally, but it is nice to have. And we got a set of artist brushes that work for watercolors, oils, or acrylics. We have a round brush, a shader flat brush, a filbert, an angular, a comb, a glaze or wash brush, a detail brush, and a fan brush. So pretty much all the brushes you would need to get started. So these are all the brushes that we got. And although I do have brushes already, I'm going to use one of these for the swatching. I think I'm going to use this one. I do not think that these are going to be the best brushes or the highest artist grade brushes, but I do think that it's nice that they came with them so you can use them with your gouache. But I also am always wanting brushes for my kiddo, so this also gives me a nice variety of brushes that I can share with him as well. And then I don't have to worry if we're painting together because I do let him use my paints, that he's using my nice brushes. Using my paints is okay. Using my brushes, not so much. So he could definitely use these. Then it came with this palette. So it has different wells in it so that you can put down your paint, some wells for mixing, the little thumb area so you can hold onto it when you're painting. I don't generally use palettes like this, but they are definitely nice to have, and they're also really great to have with my kiddos. So this will definitely get used. It just probably won't get used in this video. And then it did come with a swatch card. It's completely labeled, so you can see the names of all the colors. And it does come with 5 metallic colors. So you got a pearl white, a rose gold, a gold, a silver, and a bronze. So of the 36, 5 of them are metallics. And then turn this over. And then these are the paints. So they are in this little plastic container. They're all secure in there. So there we have the 36 colors of paint. On the actual tubes, let me grab one. It does have the name of the color, the pigment, the light fastness, and the opacity. On there, it has their brand, Chalkola, and it says gouache paint. So it is duplicated on both sides. So no matter which side of the tube you're holding, you have the information that you need. So we are actually going to swatch these out. And what I was going to do, actually, let me move this aside. So what I was planning on doing was actually swatching these in my swatch book. So this is my watercolor gouache swatch book. And this is a Canson XL watercolor book. It is 9 by 12. It is quite large. In this, I swatch out my watercolor brands so that I have all the colors. I swatch out my palettes. I test things out like mixing colors, things like that. And so I definitely want to swatch in here because this is kind of my keep all of my watercolors and gouache in one place. And I like to have it in one place so that when I'm looking for a color or I'm trying to see how a color is going to look on paper, I can pull this out and it's all together because it's spiral bound, it's in one place. But I also definitely want to swatch on their color sheet as well because they do provide it, and then that way I have a Chalkola color sheet that is ready to go also. So what I'm going to do real quick is I'm going to go and I'm going to write down all the names on here so that that way I can swatch on here. And what we're going to do is we're going to swatch here and here. So it may take a little bit of time just because we're doing 36 colors twice, but I'm going to be doing them at the same time. So it won't take too terribly long, but I want to go ahead and write down the names. That way we have spots to swatch. So I'll be right back in just a moment and we will start swatching out these colors. Okay, so I have gone through and written out all the names on a little chart. Didn't do my dimensions quite right, so I have this sort of extra spot here. I'll probably use that to do some mixing swatches later. And then I accidentally wrote black twice. It was here and I wrote it again here, so I won't be using this box down here. And I did add a box here where I can compare the two whites because it does come with titanium white and zinc white, and so I wanted to compare the opacity difference and the color difference between the two as much as I can because it's kind of hard to show white on white paper. And then on their color card, they accidentally had peach twice. It was here and then again here, and it should have been turquoise blue. So I did handwrite that just so that I would know what color was supposed to go there. And then I reordered the paint tubes in the order of their card. That way our swatch process would just go faster. One thing so far that I am really excited about is that for the whites, you got 2 of each tube, which is awesome. White gouache is the thing you go through the most in my experience because you can use it with your watercolors to add like white details on your watercolors, but also you use it a lot for mixing to make pastels and things like that. And so white you go through a lot, and so I really appreciate that they added 2 tubes of each of the whites. So this is a 36 tube set, but it is 34 colors because you have 2 of each of the whites. Now, normally I would get like a ceramic palette or my butcher tray. I'd put a little bit of the paint and then I would transfer it to my swatch book, but that's a lot of effort for swatching, and it's also harder for me to keep track of the colors and where I put them, and then I have to clean it off to make more space. And so I have found a like faster, quicker way for me to do it is to just take paint directly from the tube and put a little dot of the paint, kind of like making a dot card. If you've ever gotten a dot card from Daniel Smith or Schmincke or Winsor Newton. And so putting a little dot of the paint on there and then spreading that out into each box. And so I'll do a row at a time, adding the dots, and then I will spread it out, and then we will add it to this card as well. That is going to be my process for doing this. I am definitely not a paint expert. I am a hobbyist and enthusiast. I love playing with paint. I love color. I love mixing colors, but I am not an artist and I am not a professional, and I don't really believe that there are rules for painting. I know some people think you should swatch a certain way, or you need to draw a line and then swatch over the line. They have all these rules for the right way to do things, and my theory is when it comes to painting, the only rule is to use what you've got. So it doesn't matter if you do it any particular way, as long as it works for you and you are using what you've got. So that said, this may not be your way of swatching. It may not be the ideal way of swatching, but it is my way of swatching and it works for me. So I'm gonna get my brush wet. Now, gouache is kind of like watercolor, but more opaque. And when you use gouache, the general practice is to use it directly from the tube. It tends to dry out differently when you put it into a pan, and so a lot of times it cracks and it's harder to rewet. So most people use gouache directly from the tube, and then you add a little bit of water to make it a nice creamy consistency. I don't always do that. I actually like to have my gouache in pans, and so at the end of this video we're actually going to put some of this gouache in a pan set, and we're going to make a little palette out of it, and then we'll probably do another video where we come back and see how it did, because some of my gouache dries really bad, cracks, it's hard to rewet, and others do really well in the pans. So we're gonna kind of test that out with this. But normally you would put some paint, there's a little binder in that one. You would put some paint on your palette, add a little water, make it nice and creamy, and then you would use it like that. You can add more water to gouache and make it even runnier, wetter, and the more water you add, the less opaque it will be, but generally it'll still stay more opaque than your watercolors will. So, be interested if you guys use gouache. Are you gouache experts? I'm not a gouache expert, but I'm trying and I'm learning and I'm playing, and in my book that's what you're supposed to do for art. So I'm going to use my wet brush and just swatch it out. Could probably put a little bit more of the red on there. Didn't put as large of a dollop, so we'll add a little more. I know some people use like a black line, which is what I'm going to do on these whites to kind of show the opacity. But my swatches aren't really for that purpose. It's just so that I can see the color, because I know that I can add more or less water and change it. And because I'm not a professional, I don't care as much if it's 100% perfect. I'm gonna add just a little more of this to this swatch card. Should probably just dollop on each of these also. So I'll do that real quick. These paints are nice and creamy out of the tube. I am actually enjoying how they feel. I may speed up this part of the video so that you guys can just kind of watch me swatch, because there's not a lot to talk about unless I just want to talk about how much I love a color or how it's reacting to the water. I really don't know what you guys prefer for swatching videos. Do you want sped up? I went over the line a little bit there. Or do you want real time? I don't know what paper this is that they made their swatch card on, but it does appear to be cold press from the texture, but I don't know if it's 100% cotton or not. It does feel like it might be a little bit higher quality than my Canson swatch book is. Too much water there. I will put the price of this set down in the description box below so that you know how much it costs. And as of today, it is on Prime, so you can get it shipped for free. It'll be at your door very, very fast, which of course I love. This brush is actually nicer than I thought it would be. It's picking up a nice amount of water, which is good. A pleasant surprise. I really need to get a puck for the bottom of my water vessel when I'm using gouache, because gouache doesn't clean off your brushes quite as easily. It's a really vibrant sap green. Gouache doesn't come off your brushes quite as easily just with water, so having something at the bottom to kind of rub it against can be helpful. And they sell pucks, I don't know if y'all have ever seen them, that adhere to the bottom of your mixing vessel or rinsing vessel, and it helps clean your brush off. when you swatch like this, if you do this with watercolors, sometimes they dry pretty quickly, but it's just really easy to add a little water and get them moving. I just find it's easier than pulling out my tray and all that. I guess I'm a lazy artist. Now this is peach, or I mean they call it peach. I would call it more, it's almost buff titanium. Oops. It's almost buff titanium. It has more peach in it than buff titanium, but I think it's, you know, a good alternative in your gouache set to buff titanium. It's a little yellower, but it's really pretty. That zinc white is really thick. The titanium white is not. It's really creamy. Very different consistencies. The brush I picked is a little bit big for their swatch card, like to stay in the boxes, but it's not terrible. I am going to clean my water real quick because it is quite muddled and we're doing white. So let me clean it real quick and we'll keep going. The zinc has like a gray undertone to it. It's not as bright white. You can see that. They definitely have a very different color tone to them, even though they're white. running out of working space to put their little sample card, so I'm going to stick it right there for now, and we'll make it work. Now this one had the binder that kind of separated from it, but it mixes back in just fine. It just made it a little bit more translucent. When I put it on here, the binder had already kind of mixed back in, so this one, the swatch card, has more opacity than my book. I'm not a big fan of burnt colors, the burnt siennas, the burnt umbers. They're not colors that I use that often. I do own them, like in my watercolors, because when I first started buying tube paints and was like building my own palette, I watched a bunch of videos on, you know, the ideal colors to put in your palette. And so I bought them and make sure I had a cool red and a warm red and a cool yellow and a warm yellow and a cool blue and yeah. And then your umbers and your siennas. And then I realized that you don't have to have someone else's perfect palette. You can make your own, and they really aren't my thing. Now for fall, I'll probably use them more. I'll probably make some sort of a fall palette and I might use them more. But for the majority of the year, they're really not my favorite, and so I don't really use them. So I've been working this summer at building my own palette with the colors that I actually like to use, that speak to me, and throwing all the rules out of the door, and throwing all those kind of rules out the door, because I've decided that there are no rules except that I need to use my paint, and if I don't like the colors or they don't speak to me, then I don't use them. And nothing that I paint has to be realistic either. My trees don't have to have the perfect sap green. My ocean doesn't have to be Caribbean blue. It could be pink if I want it to be. It could be yellow if I want it to be. So I'm getting better at leaving like the expected behind. And oh, there's a little bit of brown in my brush. I thought I got it all out. That pearl white is really, really pretty. Even with the little bit of burnt umber that decided to stay in my brush. This to me isn't really rose gold, it's more of a copper. Still really pretty, and really glad to have it because I like metallics to add little touches to my art, but it's not quite rose gold to me. It is definitely more copper. Do you guys like metallic? I do have like metallic shimmer watercolors too, like hydrocolors and things. I don't use them that often. They're more just for adding a little fun flair to pieces, but I find that I do like putting like gold on my pieces. Some little pops of that metallic. So I'm excited to have gold and bronze and silver, the coppery rose gold, and the pearl white, because I didn't have those. I just had a gold. That's from Daniel Smith, I think. It's a watercolor, not a gouache. Might have added a little too much water to that swatch, but still really pretty. All right, so those are the colors that come in this set. I think it's a really good set. It has lots of blues, as you can see. I mean, look at that Prussian blue. Look how pretty that is. It has most of the colors that I would expect to find in a set. And then it has the really fun metallics, which are awesome too. They are really nice. Some are more opaque than others. Because these are gouaches, they're gonna say they're opaque, and they are compared to watercolors. But some of them are more opaque than others. And of course, some of it is dependent on how much water you add and how much water I added in my swatches. So my big swatch book, my Canson, is still a little bit wet in spots, but there you have the collection of colors. I really like these. I'm really excited. I'm super happy that Chalkola reached out to me and asked if I wanted to try these out and share them with you guys, because I don't have this many colors in gouache. I only have a handful of tubes, and most of them are kind of very unique, funky colors, like funky greens and turquoises and things like that. I don't have primary colors and like a standard set, and I think that these are really pretty. And the metallics are quite nice. I'm gonna take a couple of colors. I'm gonna take, I think, 3, and I'm going to plop some down. I'm gonna do a blue. I'm gonna do this Prussian blue because it's so dark. And I'm going to do burnt sienna. And I think let's do the crimson red. And what I'm gonna do is I'm going to swatch them, and then I'm going to fade them out with more water and see how transparent they get. So I'm gonna start with the red. So this is crimson red, and I just got my brush wet. I'm not on the screen, so that's really not helpful to you. So I'm going to drag out the color some. And I'm going to add more water. And more water. And more. We're gonna let that sit. And I'm gonna do the same thing with this burnt umber. So I added more water than what I did in my swatches that are over here. And I'm gonna pull that out some. Oh, this isn't the last thing we're gonna do. We're also gonna fill my pan or my paint palette. And I'm gonna pull the water out. And then lastly, I saved the Prussian blue for last because it gets so dark, it's hard to get it out of your brush, and I didn't wanna muddle the other colors. But you can see how opaque this is compared to this because I already put so much more water in there. And I'm just gonna keep adding some more water, pulling it down. And so you can get these to act like a watercolor. So if you don't have watercolors, or you have a very limited watercolor palette and you wanted to get this, you could use this, and then you could further dilute them, make them more transparent with water. And you would get some really pretty effects with the colors. So you do have that option as well. So I wanted to share that just because that makes it a little bit more cost effective when you buy these if you have more uses for them. And so you can definitely add more water, which you can do with any gouache, but these performed really well when I added the water. And you can change the transparency quite nicely. Really, really pretty. So that is my swatch and share of these. What we're gonna do now is I bought this Paul Rubens paint palette. It's like a sealed paint palette, and it has a mixing tray on this side that comes out. I say that. Oh, it comes out so that you have mixing space there and here. It's quite a large palette. It's about 12 inches. Yeah, 12 inches tall, 12 inches long. And then it has these long wells here for you to put your paints in. And then over here it has this extra space, which you could use for a well as well. And then it comes with this little, I don't know, thingamabob that lets you take this out. So if you didn't want to use this, or if you wanted to move this and have 3 mixing trays, you could. But what we're going to do is we're going to fill this tray with some of these gouache because I really want to see how they react if they're dry in a pan and I go back to re-wet them. So what we're going to do is we're going to pick the colors that I want in my palette, and I'm going to set my giant book aside, and I'm just going to set, I'll do it this way, hopefully you can see at least part of it. I'm going to set my swatch sheet here, and I'm going to pick my colors. Now there's 34 different colors on this swatch sheet, and I only have 24 spots. So I cannot take them all. So I definitely have to be cognizant of that. I am definitely going to get some white. I'm going to put zinc white over here, and I'm going to make it its own little spot. And I'm going to stick that there. And then I'm going to pick my colors. So I am drawn to I want some lilac. Now I'm not going to be filling these pans completely. I'm just putting a little piece there. And I'm going to use the palette knife, and I'm going to kind of shove it to the side. That's my little palette, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to let this dry open in my studio, and then we'll do a video soon, not like tomorrow, but we'll do a video where we check it out and see what happens when I re-wet these and I use them, and see how it compares to the swatches that I got fresh out of the tube. That way we can kind of see how it does with that process. But that's my little palette, so I'm gonna scoot that like this and set this here. That's my video on the Chalkola gouache paint set. I would love to hear your thoughts if you guys use gouache, if you've tried Chalkola products, if you have questions or comments about the products, my swatches, really anything, just comment below and I will definitely get back with you. Make sure that you are subscribed so you don't miss the second video of this series where we swatch out the acrylic paints. Make sure you give me a thumbs up if you did like this share of Chalkola's gouache paint set, and don't forget to just scribble.